Hi everybody, welcome to Talking Automotive. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra.
Hi John, today we've got Gina McCartney. Gina is the Executive Manager for Customer Experience at REA Group, which is realestate.com. And Gina covers off detail on the real estate market, the key drivers to real estate, and how the two are intertwined with the automotive industry. The similarities between the two key drivers and the key takeaways are really an eye-opener. If you like what we cover, please click the link and like us on YouTube. Also subscribe to our channel below and also follow us on LinkedIn with Talking Automotive.
Let's get into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, PreCar Fleet Services is an independent division of PreCar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, PreCar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies, and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how PreCar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Hi Gina, welcome to the show. It's great to have you speaking to us today. Maybe just to kick things off, can you maybe just tell us a bit about Gina McCartney, who you are, and some background to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Gina McCartney. Thank you for having me here today. Super excited to see you both. So my background, if I go back to perhaps my brief youth and then into professional career, I really, my whole life was destined to be a creative, painting, sculpting, designing, and off the back of that passion, went to uni, studied creative advertising, and was destined, my path was to become an art director. My very early career was in advertising agencies and spent 10 years servicing some pretty big clients like Bilo, Coles Myer Group, CBA, ANZ, Heart Foundation, and then some auto clients. So BMW and Mini were big clients of mine. And it was during that time that I realised how much I loved cars. And, you know, surprise, surprise, or no surprise, I joined Renault Australia. And joining Renault at the time was at a really pivotal point for the business. And that was all about increasing and finding every possible growth opportunity we could in the market. And my role was to introduce a CRM and digital program and really lift the capability of the dealer network from a lead management perspective. So getting our data right, building confidence back in the network that we were providing leads to them and generating value from head office. And then from there, my role moved into a brand and events role. And so sort of had the full marketing suite and had an awesome time with the business and great team. And then my time was up when I was tapped on the shoulder for a role at REA Group. And I was like, what's REA Group? And I realised realestate.com.au. Joined the business, not really knowing much about what the role I was joining did, but it was a go-to-market manager role. And I've been there now close to 7 years and moved my way through the various segments. So worked in our residential business, our developer business, commercial property, media agency and clients, and also lucky enough to do a stint in Malaysia. And I lived there when we acquired our Southeast Asia portals and helped with the integration of that business. So had an awesome career here at REA and now run a team called the Customer Excellence Team. And so my team of 20 incredibly talented people help support our 230 sales teams across Australia. And that includes their learning, their development, coaching, all training, all go-to-market, sales, support, collateral, and also operations and analytics. So KPIs, commissions, incentives, sprints. And really our big team mission and vision is to pave the new way of selling and what selling can look like when you work for REA. That's a bit about my story. I love gardening, love dancing and eating, and that's how I spend most of my time.
Wow, that's an impressive backstory, Gina. So you've migrated from doing the creative stuff through to auto and now into real estate. Now we're keen to get a bit of understanding as to realestate.com or REA Group, and what's the backstory of realestate.com?
Yeah, so our business was born in a garage in Doncaster. And for those that aren't familiar with Doncaster, it's in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. And so that was in 1995. And they came up with a crazy idea of why don't we put the photos of the property onto online so people can see them on the internet. And so literally scanning photo by photo by photo built this website that looks very different today than what it did obviously 20 plus years ago. And over the years, just a really brilliant, simple idea took off. And today we're the leading Australian property portal, and we have 100 million plus visitors a month coming to our site, trillions of photos from a data perspective. And yeah, we service most property clients around Australia, and that includes real estate agents, property managers, developers, home builders, land developers, media clients. And I've left someone off probably, but almost all, and anyone that wants to reach property seekers, we do business with.
Now, Gina, you've got a really interesting background, having spent time in creative, you're in automotive, and now you're in real estate. Can you maybe just discuss some of the similarities between automotive and real estate?
Yeah, I remember when I joined REA, and it was probably a month in, I thought, wow, I didn't realise there were so many similarities between the two industries. And if I start from a business structure perspective, the similarities of, franchise groups, independence, that relationship between head office and, the small businesses that are running in local and regional areas. And I think that pressure that applies with a small business to find the right talent, retain talent when there is no professional requirement, there's no hurdle to get into either industry. And I think that is a shared challenge that both still share today. And I know the real estate industry in particular, the institutes are really trying to introduce, whether it's professional courses, but create more opportunities for the right people to enter the industry. So they've got really quality staff servicing consumers and vendors. And I remember that was a challenge in the automotive industry, finding the right talent and apprenticeships in the after sales perspective, perhaps a better bedded process. But that was probably one thing that I saw straight away. There's a big lesson in automotive that I think real estate can learn with the handshake between sales and after sales. And if you think of the real estate version of that is the sales and rental market. Now, rent rolls are the most profitable part of a real estate agency. And if you think about the handover and the importance of one to the other for the ongoing retention of a customer, I think that's a really important similarity between the two that I think some best practice sharing could happen more. And then probably the other big similarity, I would say, is the consumer is becoming much smarter and much savvier. And this is probably not exclusive to automotive and real estate, but their expectations have increased tenfold. And no longer can you get back to a lead or an inquiry within a couple of days. We're now seeing consumer expectations at a couple of minutes. And I think that's something that dealerships deal with daily, and, the now economy that exists within the consumer world. I think probably the other thing on the consumer front is that the journeys are so linked. If I'm pregnant and I need a house with an extra bedroom, there's a good chance I'm going to need a bigger car. And I think those life moments, there's an absolute link between them, and everyone knows it's often, not always, but often cheaper to finance your car off the back of your home loan. So the journeys and life moments are really similar.
And Gina, what data do you use to compare the consumer trends that you're seeing? So when you're talking about the financing of the house or those life changes that you're with people that I've got a baby on the way, I need a 3-bedroom instead of a 2-bedroom. Or I'm downsizing, I don't need to have 3 bedrooms, I should downsize to a 2-bedroom. What data do you use and see?
Yeah, so it probably wouldn't be a surprise that we have got a ton of data from our website. And so we sort of amalgamate qualitative and quantitative data, I suppose you could call it. So basic things like how many people are visiting our site, how many are looking at certain houses in certain suburbs, which gives us a really good idea of demand. And then the other thing that we'll overlay with that, things like site surveys, which are a really easy way for us to get quite large volumes of really rich insight. So why are you here today? What's driving your decision? What are you looking for? And then overlaying that with some demographic and life change type data. So that would be we'll call first-party data. And then third-party data that we sometimes use, so things like Roy Morgan, Nielsen data, which I know used to be really big in the automotive industry. I'm not sure if it's still so prevalent. And data like Biz Oxford, as an example, which tells us, how many commencements and how many, large dwellings will be built over what period of time, gives us a really good sense of supply, which is indicative of demand because they're so closely coupled, are really high end, have a bit of outdoor living. So an example of where we see supply and demand giving us really good insight into what buyers are looking for is empty nesters. And that segment, whether they're in the Hawthorne areas, Armidale, Eaglemont, and I'm picking areas that I know, and they've got those huge, beautiful homes, the Californian bungalow with 5 bedrooms, but all of the kids left the nest. And they want something that's as high end, still has space for all the grandkids to still come over and visit, but don't want to go into a high-rise apartment. So there's a cycle of demand driving supply. And so we're seeing a lot more smaller developments that are really high-end boutique emerge. And so there's a cycle that you can see with the supply being an indicator as much as the demand. So it's a really interesting industry.
In terms of the main trends in terms of renters and buyers, what are you seeing there, and how do you segment the market from a demographic point of view?
We probably mainly focus on location as the primary segmentation, and that's mainly driven by the way that we service our customers, and they're obviously very location-centric. And I think a big trend that we're seeing, and this would be probably no surprise off the back of the wonderful COVID year we all had last year, is that people are looking for bigger homes and bigger land. And we've seen massive surges in regional property interest. And earlier last year, there was a strong indication that people were migrating out of Victoria when we were in the lockdown, and people were looking to move to Queensland. And interstate migration is not a new thing, but that certainly increased. And towards the end of last year, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2019 wasn't a great year for automotive either, and it was a very soft year for real estate. And so towards the end of last year, we were seeing property sales and buyer inquiry exceeding 2019 quite confidently. So we've seen buyer interest and buyer inquiry at an all-time high. And what will be really interesting is this year to see how that demand continues. And I think when consumer confidence continues to return, and it is slowly but surely, the market will start to really fire up, back to, we'll call it the pre-2019 days. But the other interesting thing, and it's so state sensitive as well. So, for example, in Queensland, it's really, really, really hard to find a rental. Rental demand is extremely high, and there's just not much stock available. And WA is in a similar position, but each state has its little nuances at the moment. And I think the overall trend of people want more space. So if they think they're going to go back down into a lockdown and they're working from home 24/7, and home is their work, play, everything, they want to be in a bigger space. So we think that trend will continue to emerge. And another trend that we saw really pick up towards the end of last year was days on site. So days on site is a metric we watch very closely, as it's an indicator of how quickly properties are selling. And days on site or days on market decreased quite dramatically towards the end of last year, which is a great sign. Great sign for our customers and all the vendors out there selling.
So, Gina, what do you see as the leading indicator? So when you guys look at the data that tells you the story, like days on site, search for certain property types and suburbs to get the heat, if you like. So where do you see the drivers coming from? Or what do you look at to say, right, is it interest rates? Is it disposable income? What are those leading indicators that tell the story that something good or bad is going to happen?
Yeah, sure. So interest rates are a really key driver, and that obviously means that more people can afford to buy a house, which means that with greater demand, prices go up. So and with prices going up on established property, that means that demand for new property increases. So that creates a lovely, healthy cycle where we have new neighbourhoods, new properties being built and created, and new opportunities and more affordable housing. When there is little demand, that creates a bit of a choker. The other factor that, whether it's a indicator or perhaps a factor, similar to the automotive industry, government legislation and policies can make or break industry overnight. And there was a period where, probably a few years ago, where I felt like a new government policy around foreign investment was being released every 5 seconds. And when our foreign buyers are struggling to get into the market, that puts a negative impact on local buyer. It means that property can be more expensive. It means less availability when there are less developments and less, affordable housing. Another indicator that we use, and probably starting at the very top of the funnel, if we call it that, is our audience numbers. And we watch them, and we watch that number like hawks, day in, day out. And the next layer down from that is buyer inquiry. So it's great having a really large audience, but what you really want is an audience that are actively seeking out properties and engaging with our agents and customers. And then other indicators that we look at, so as I mentioned earlier, days on site or days on market, that gives us a feel for how quickly properties are moving, and therefore how, what challenges our customers might face. And we release numerous things to help them move properties faster, because it's in everyone's best interest that properties sell, and we have lots of properties selling. But another factor that we look at, great focus, is consumer and industry confidence, because one feeds the other, and it's important that everyone feels really confident about their property journey, and that businesses and again, many agencies out there are very small businesses with 3 or 4 people chosen. When small businesses are thriving, that's a healthy economy.
Now, Gina, Mark and I have been doing a lot of discussion about how the automotive market is going to look this next year, and we think there's a good chance that it's going to be a pretty strong market. What do you see are the big challenges for the real estate industry coming through this year?
I think I'll probably share your views, and we've got economists who very, very, very clever economists that have got their views on this too, which I'll sort of feed from. But I think from a customer perspective, I think the challenges of always adapting and being really agile with potential further lockdowns. And I think we were incredibly impressed by the way the industry pivoted, dare I use it. And probably an example of that was we introduced virtual inspections and digital inspections. And that was something that went from, let's say, 1 in 200 real estate agencies used pre-COVID, and then, close to 100% of agencies were using during COVID. And so I think the challenge will be how the industry continues to adapt in challenging times and create new ways of engaging with prospective buyers and sellers in a ongoing blended virtual in real life world. They're a resilient bunch anyway. And, the real estate industry goes through cycles, and for those that have been in the industry long enough have been through many a cycle. But this presents a really interesting challenge where it's about sort of flipping what everyone knew as engaging with, potential clients on its head and being quite brave and creative, I think.
And following on from that, once we get over COVID, where do you see it going? Do you think there's going to be a blend between digital and physical?
I think 100% it will stay blended. And what will drive that won't be what the industry wants, it will be what consumers want. And this is similar to, we've got 900 odd people in our Melbourne office. This is a similar thing we're seeing, and I don't see it as any different, where now that we've had a taste of what it's like to have more work-life balance and be at home more with our families and friends, we won't want to let go of that. We want a bit of, interaction and face-to-face and in-person time, but there'll always be, from here on, I believe, a desire to be able to do things virtually. And if you think about interstate buyers or people who can't, get from work to a inspection within, in peak hour traffic at 5:30 o'clock, there's a whole new door opening to more buyers and new opportunities. So I think for our customers and industry that don't accept and acknowledge and make the most of that opportunity, they'll lose out. But there are many that are adapting and realise that the opportunity is bigger than before and more accessible.
Now, Gina, you talk about the customer driving the industry and driving the experience, and the industry having to keep up with what the customer's expectations are. And we see the parallels are amazing with the auto business, because as a colleague of ours, Paul Fisher, used to say, your customers will put you out of business if you get them wrong. So you talk about the industry needing to adapt and adopt, and one point you made was how long it takes to respond to a lead. Has the sales process changed from real estate? Because it used to be that you'd have an open for inspection, people walk through, they basically see the house for maybe half an hour, if that, because it's only open for half an hour. They might spend 15 minutes there, they go off, they come back, maybe look at it a second time, go off, and then go to the auction, bid, buy it, and end up spending, $1.5 million for something they've been in for all of maybe an hour and a half. Is that changing, or how is that journey? How do you map that journey?
It's a really good question, because there's an interesting dynamic, and this is probably another similarity with automotive, where the rest of the world is up here with fully digital. Digital is fully embraced, and there are many companies forging ahead and leveraging digital. There are some that are in between that have got 1 foot in the digital camp and 1 foot in the we do it the old way camp, and then there are those that are very rigid and don't change their ways. And I see both industries kind of in the middle. Those fundamental steps that you just described haven't really changed in real estate. There's not much different from that process. But what has changed is the consumer empowerment and their ability to go to that open for inspection with all of the information they could possibly want and need. And so they're walking into that house confident they don't need information. They're not asking for the support that they used to, or lead me through this process, because they can research everything. They've got everything at their fingertips. And so it's changing the dynamic and the value proposition of the agent. And so something we really focus on with our customers, because we see it as such an important and critical part of the ecosystem, the role that they play. And we want them to be highlighted and that's that role that they play to be really elevated in the consumer's mind, because it is a relationship based moment. And ahead of automotive, it's the biggest and most expensive decision you're going to make in your life. And consumers just aren't ready and willing, not all of them. I mean, admittedly, maybe your investor segment is probably more likely to buy a property online unseen. But the majority of Australians, their heart is still in it, and they want to know that they're looking the person in the eye that they're doing the transaction with. And as long as that's the way consumers feel, and being a really emotional big decision, agents play a huge role. So I think it's sort of a foot in each camp, and I don't ever foresee consumers being confident enough to make decisions without that interaction. But the process does need to change to make it easier. And whether that's that's things like stamp duty, the way contracts are done, it's very, very hard. Even the way that, you get your financing, it's a really laborious task and quite scary to go through. So we see that those moments of truth can be improved by they move to a more digital process or whatever that looks like. We need to be focusing on how we make that a smoother process for consumers. But the core fundamentals are still there. It'll be interesting to see in the next 5 years how much that changes. And I think things like pandemics force change.
Gina, a question for me is, in automotive, you see all the customers are doing all their research online. So a dealer may not even know which customers are coming to his website and what they're doing until at some stage down the road, they then come into the dealership, but they've already basically made up their mind. So the dealer doesn't have opportunity to really engage the customer in the early stage of the process. Is there anything happening in real estate that you can engage with customers on an earlier stage of the buyer process?
Yeah, so we have tools that help our customers understand what a prospect is interested in. And so that gives them a bit of leverage. So when they do respond to that inquiry, they have a level of insight into, where they're at in their buying cycle, or, how soon are they looking to buy? Are they an existing buyer or are they looking to sell as well? And so that helps to better tailor the conversation and make it more relevant. Because there's nothing worse than when you have a conversation with someone and you're at point A because you've got there doing whatever you had to do, but they're at point B and you're already not on the same page. And I think changing, and this is a really interesting challenge and opportunity for both industries, but changing the purpose of that person in the sales room. Are they a salesperson anymore? Like what should they be called? Are they a relationship builder? Are they a retention manager? Is their purpose to make sure they stay with the brand rather than buy that model? And I think that's a similar challenge for real estate where, if they stay with that agency and they're an ongoing customer and they become a landlord with your business, that's a really profitable client. So it's about not fighting the consumer and trying to, change their mind, but leverage the information and if you haven't received the information, it's how you can be smarter with getting that information from them.
Some fascinating stuff. The similarities between the two industries, it just keeps really standing out for me when you're talking about the investors versus the retail buyers. Investors like a fleet buyer for automobiles, so you're collecting a number of them, and you're less emotive. It's all about the financial returns. What's it going to cost? What's my rental return going to be? And what's the capital gain projection likely to be? Even though you're speculating as to what it will be, if anything, or you might have some bad years where it drops down. One thing with cars, at least one thing's going to depreciate. That's one guarantee until it becomes a collector car in 30 years' time. Then it goes up. But yeah, it's fascinating just seeing the two and the crossover and some of the similar challenges that you've got with your customers. And one thing I was going to ask further to John's question is, how does it fit where a customer goes to your site but then turns up at the house and they ask for your phone number? Does that number link into the lead that was sent through? Is there a CRM in the real estate agencies that ties the two together, or is that just total by chance?
At the real estate agency end, they all use CRM, so they will know whether that walk-in, OFI attendee was paired or matched to a lead received from realestate.com.au or any other portal for that matter. But we don't have a process to understand that. And so similar to, it actually reminded me of very early on back in the BMW days where we were talking about using beacons in dealerships and using that technology to tag and flag when a prospect had entered into a dealership. And it's a similar challenge where you're bringing the offline and online worlds together. But I think the key is, you can invest a lot of time and energy into matching that, but the question to ask is what value does who get, and what extra value is the consumer or the buyer or the prospect getting? And I'm a big believer in incentivizing data. If you give someone a good enough reason to give their data, they'll give it. People aren't shy in handing over data when they think it's worthwhile. So I think the question to ask, and something we're always asking ourselves, is what does that person get back, and how can we, rather than relying on the agent, for example, to be tracking things and investing in tech to do it, how can we get the consumer to play a role in this? And little things like area or suburb investment tips, giving them average rental yields if we know that they're an investor looking at a property. But really, because we've got lots of that content online, but it's the pairing that is when I think the real magic can happen.
No, I think that's fascinating, that whole area, and how do you match it all together? I think that's where the value is trying to get all that right.
It can take years and years and years and years to perfectly match and have a single point of truth of data, and it's irresistible to go down that path. That I think, having worked on enough data migration and integration projects throughout my time, the question I always ask, what value does who get? And as long as you can answer that question, and there's always a customer or always a consumer in that response, then it's worthwhile.
Now, Gina, is there anything else you want to add before we go to a summary?
The thing that popped into my mind, and it was nice to refresh the memory on the similarities between the two industries, is that how do we get the two talking more? I think, the same social drivers impact both industries, and whether that's interest rates, employment rates, consumer confidence. If there are so many similarities, what can we do to help leverage the years of experience in both to seek out opportunities and flag signals where we think that things are going well and there might be opportunities? I think there's a big patch of work to be done there.
And is there any data sharing between yourselves and, say, some of the auto industry portals?
We work closely with car sales. So I have peers that sit over there doing similar jobs to me and work with their sales team, and we share. You can imagine the parallels between our two businesses it's uncanny at times when we talk about, what's keeping us up at night and trends that we're seeing with even our audience data. They're almost, the trends are uncannily similar. And so we share information from that perspective, and certainly we share a lot about how, things like customer research and insights programs, and we really leverage each other's intel. I think more can be done. I think more can be done with maybe at an OEM level, perhaps.
Okay, Mark, do you want to do the summary?
I've been taking lots of notes here, so with highlighter and everything. I try to summarise each podcast with and do it justice, because you've covered off a hell of a lot of stuff, and my writing is getting worse as I get older. So it's hard for me to read my own writing, because I type more than write, but I'll give it a crack. So let me know if I've missed anything. Now, I'm keen to summarise, and correct me if I've missed anything here, your story, because it's an amazing one, and thanks for coming on the show today. So you're a creative person, destined to be a creative person. You've wanted to be an art director, and then you've worked through agencies from the creative side of things, from banks through to automotive. And so your journey has been a very diverse one, but very much focusing on CRM and digital, but also doing brand and events. So you've then moved across to from auto into real estate with REA Group, and you started in the go-to-market area, but you've also gone through a number of roles, which has even seen you have a stint in Malaysia, which has been pretty exciting, and working with a number of different customers, whether they be developers, the residential areas, the real estate agents, etc., and the commercial side. When we look at the backstory of realestate.com, I was not aware it started out in Doncaster back in 1995 in a garage. I was living out of Doncaster at that time, so I'm wondering which garage it was in. But it's a pretty amazing success story when you think it's the go-to place for real estate. And 1 million visitors per month, that's a fair audience that you're getting. And you're dealing with agents and developers and a whole range of industry players. So when you look at the similarities, and this is what we're really keen to focus in on, these are the two biggest purchases that an individual has in life. So house first, car second. So if we're thinking of from an automotive perspective, the house is a significant one. And you mentioned that it's life changes that drive the behaviour, whether you're moving up or down, or there's added additions to the family or people moving out. So that drives that behaviour. But also you talked about the similarities in the auto side is the relationships. And this comes through in a lot of our podcasts where you talked about there's franchise groups and there's those relationships with head office and finding and attracting and retaining talent, because it's a lucrative industry, but also can be a challenging one. It's weekends and it can be hard work. And when we look at the data, because the data is everything, and you look at visits to your site and site surveys where you get a lot of that primary data, but then you also get other sources from the industry as far as other indicators like what's happening from government legislation, interest rates, audience numbers, and buyer inquiries that are coming through and what are they looking for, and even just measuring, like getting feedback on consumer confidence. So pretty strong leading indicators, all of which cross over very much into the auto space. And then when we look at those key drivers, they really determine what is being sold and what's being rented. And then the challenges you talked about is, the adapting to, we've had one COVID shock or a couple if you're in Victoria, and how the industry has adapted and pivoted, but then we're getting still obviously some traditional requirements of that the Saturday opens or the Thursday night opens, the inquiries online. If you're a retail buyer, you still want to get in there and crush the carpet. You need to feel it, smell the coffee brewing or the baking in the oven of the bread so that you can close the deal. It's that smelling of the new car when you go for the test drive. So that side of it is very similar for a retail buyer. But you mentioned the investor who is like a fleet buyer. They're looking at the numbers. So it's what's the return of that suburb, that property type, that square meterage. And it's more of a analytical purchase as opposed to that emotional side. But most of it still is very much an emotional purchase, which is why the blend, and you mentioned the importance of that omni-channel. You can't go away from digital, because digital, what you're doing is you're empowering the customers, and customers are driving where the industry is going. So if you're only doing opens without really embracing the digital side, integrating the data from your digital site and also what you're collecting at your open for inspections, but then responding to those leads quickly so you can get people into those open for inspections. Geez, it sounds like a car dealership, doesn't it, John? It's fascinating, the two similarities. And just even I see that if you're in the auto industry and you're not watching the real estate market and the trends in your area, in your state, you're missing out, because the two really link in so strictly and strongly. And definitely from a real estate side, responding quicker to leads like the auto industry has had to do and is still improving. And it's amazing. We interviewed David Kane from the US, who was talking about best practice for what they see over there. And John, what was it? It was over 100%. The percentages dropped the more minutes ticked by as your success rates to sale. And it was quite frightening to see the difference. But empowering, having that good customer experience makes a lot of sense. And have I missed anything?
It's an incredible wrap.
Gina, thanks very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And I think there's such a close similarity, and it's been great understanding how close the two industries are. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me. I hope I can be part of bringing the two industries closer together.
Oh, absolutely, Gina. It makes so much sense, and definitely the collaboration between the two needs to definitely improve further, because there's definitely mutual benefits there. Thanks for listening to our podcast today. If you need any more information on what we've covered, please reach out to either John Sinclair or myself, Mark Palavestra, on LinkedIn, or leave us a message or a comment on the link below. Also, if you like what you've seen, click the subscribe button and also like us on YouTube. And if you have challenges with YouTube, please subscribe to us on Spotify or on iTunes. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. We'll chat to you next week.